I'm going to start from the middle, not the beginning. The official beginning was 2014, they tell us. Then, 24th February 2022, the big date everyone remembers, the one that turned into a curse word. But for me, it really started on a quiet evening in my village, when my son asked if tanks were louder than tractors. I told him yes, a lot louder. He asked if we would hear them from our house. I lied and said no. By the time you hear the first real siren, you already know too much. We'd all been watching the news for weeks. Columns of Russian armor on the borders, satellite pictures, foreign politicians making statements that sounded like apologies in advance. Everyone in my unit had the same joke. They're very concerned. We should feel very saved. We laughed because the other option was panic. I was already in uniform when the full-scale invasion started. I'd signed the papers in 2015 after Ilovaisk, after Debaltseve, after funerals where the coffins looked too small for the boys inside. I thought I understood what war meant. Trench lines, rotations, the familiar gray of the Donbass steppe. A front line you could draw on a map. Then in 2022, in a single night, the front line became the whole country. That first morning, our commander walked into the barracks with his phone in his hand, the way you carry bad news. He didn't need to say anything. We'd already heard the explosions in the distance, the dull thud that makes the window glass vibrate a little, like it's shivering. Kyiv, Kharkiv, Odessa, someone read from a telegram channel. Airports, command posts, they're hitting everywhere. Everywhere? Another guy repeated. They got lost or what? Nobody laughed. The thing about courage is that from the inside, it feels a lot like fear plus stubbornness.
We were in a small town in the east. Doesn't matter which one. They all have the same things. A Lenin statue they took down or painted, a worn-out school, a supermarket with bad coffee, and a bus stop where old women gossip like it's their personal news agency. In February, that town became a chessboard. Russian troops pushing from the north and east, our guys digging in, civilians trying to decide if they should pack their whole life into 2 suitcases or pretend it would somehow all be fine. Our battalion's job was to hold one of the approaches to the town, a strip of road that passed between 2 low, muddy fields and a thin forest belt. It looked ordinary, harmless. You could imagine kids racing their bikes there in summer. We knew that if the Russians broke through that route, they'd have a straight shot into the town center. No fancy operational plan, just geography and common sense. So we dug, we strung wire, we surveyed the ground until we could see it with our eyes closed. At night, we sat in the trench and listened. Distant artillery, the occasional burst of machine gun fire, the whine of drones somewhere in the sky. The sounds layered themselves into something like a second language. You start to tell them apart the way a mother knows the different cries of her baby. Incoming, outgoing, close, too close. Somewhere in those nights, I stopped thinking of myself as a guy who signed up and started feeling like what the news called me, Ukrainian soldier. It's funny how words you hear on TV suddenly move into your own body. People ask later, were you afraid when the Russians attacked? As if there was a neat moment when fear clocked in like a factory worker. Truth is, the attack wasn't a movie scene. There was no slow-motion shot of tanks cresting the hill with dramatic music. The war came in pieces. A rumor first, a drone sighting, a radio message with too much static, a civilian car driving too fast down the road away from the front.
We heard about the first breakthrough attempt from a neighboring unit. One of my friends, Yura, came back from a recon patrol, dropped his helmet onto the table, and said, almost casually, "They're already inside the forests on the other side of the highway. This is not probe. A group. With armor." "How many?" our squad leader asked. Yura shrugged. Enough that I didn't state a count. That was how I learned about the event, as some report will probably phrase it one day. Not from a TV anchor, not from a presidential address, but from a tired man with mud on his boots and a new deep line between his eyebrows. Behind him, the sky looked strangely peaceful. Light drifting clouds, a winter sun trying to remember how to be warm. We started getting fragments from other directions. A friend from my old unit calling from near Hostomel, shouting over the roar of aircraft. They thought they'd land and have a parade. Tell them we're the wrong country for that. Then the line cut off. A cousin sending a photo from Kyiv, a supermarket blown open, its shelves hanging out like ribs. She wrote, "We're in the metro. Don't worry, we're fine." People always say they're fine when they're not. It's a kind of superstition. If you write it, maybe it will become true. Every new message, every video of a burning column, every map with red arrows, pressed on us like extra weight in a rucksack. But it also did something else. It tightened something inside. Not fear, not exactly anger. Something more like, no, you don't get to do this here. You have to understand. By then, we weren't just defending land. We were defending all the small, stubborn details of our lives. My son's schoolyard, my mother's kitchen window with the geraniums, the way our language sounds when old men swear at football matches. You don't think about geopolitics when you're wiping oil off your rifle. You think, you will not take this from me.
On the third day, our commander gathered us in a shallow depression near the trench, out of sight of the road. He had a paper map spread over a wooden crate, weighed down with stones so the wind wouldn't rearrange the front line. He pointed at our position, then at an arrow drawn with a thick red marker. "This is them," he said. "They're going to try again, probably with more support. Our job is the same. Hold this road. We're not a large unit, but we're not alone. Artillery behind us. Another company on the flank. Territorial defense in town. We hold, they live. Simple. Simple. I remember the word because that's when something unexpected happened inside me. The fear went quiet. Not because the situation got better. If anything, it was getting worse. But his words gave me a clear shape to my world. This strip of road, these men beside me, this task. Hold. That's it. When your mind has a mission that fits into a single sentence, the chaos outside becomes background noise. I caught my reflection later in a cracked car mirror someone had stuck into the trench wall. Helmet, dark circles under the eyes, dried mud on my cheek. I looked older than I had a week before, but also harder, like someone had sharpened the edges. Okay, I thought, so this is who I am now. That was the introduction, if you like, the part where the war stopped being headlines and became the ground under my boots. Everything after that, the first time I saw the Russians up close, the strange conversations we had across gun sites and ruined houses, the things they told me about why they were here, that came later. And none of it, I'll tell you now, went the way I expected. The first Russian I met was a voice on the radio. Not even on our radio. We'd picked up some cheap Chinese scanner in town before the invasion. One of the local guys swore you could listen to taxi drivers, truckers, even cops if you knew the frequencies. At the time, it felt like a toy. 3 days into the full-scale war, it felt like a weapon. That night, the horizon was flashing from distant artillery, like a thunderstorm that couldn't make up its mind where to strike. We were passing the scanner around in the trench, more as a distraction than anything. Static, bursts of Ukrainian, a fragment of music, then more static. And then, suddenly, a man's voice in Russian, hurried, clipped. Sastrali, Gorit, Patieri, Commandir 300, Topliva malo. Stuck, burning, casualties, commander wounded, low on fuel. He sounded normal, a bit short of breath, irritated, the way a foreman might sound if a truck broke down on a road repair job. Is that them? Yura asked. Our squad leader leaned closer, listening. The voice faded, then came back on a different channel, talking to someone else. Coordinates, complaints, asking for evac, swearing about some Ukrainian garbage that had hit them. Yeah, our squad leader said quietly. That's them. It was such a stupidly ordinary way to discover the enemy was really there. No dramatic first glimpse of a foreign flag, just some guy on a radio talking like we were an annoying logistical problem. I felt a strange mix of things. A spike of adrenaline, sure, but also a cold, insulted kind of anger. We're not just a problem on your road, I thought. We're the reason you shouldn't have come at all. A few hours later, the discovery became more physical. I was on a short recon patrol with Yura and another guy, Slava. Our job was to check a tree line that ran parallel to the main road to see if there were any signs of movement. It was that gray time just before dawn when colors haven't fully decided what they are yet. The fields were patches of dirty snow and mud. Our breath hung in front of us. We moved in bursts, walk, listen, crouch. My body was tense, but my brain was strangely calm, focused on details. The wet sound of my boots, the prickling of sweat under my vest, the way my rifle strap dug into my shoulder. Then we saw the first sign, tracks, tank tracks crossing the frozen field at an angle, coming from the north, cutting toward the road, and then stopping in a churned-up mess of mud and blackened snow. We followed them, carefully, staying low. There was a faint smell of burned fuel in the air, mixed with that metallic scent of hot metal cooling in cold air. We reached the edge of a shallow dip in the ground and froze. Below us, in the hollow, lay a Russian armored vehicle, an IFV, or what was left of it. The turret was twisted at an awkward angle, its barrel pointing at the sky like a raised finger. Smoke still curled lazily from the open hatches. Artillery got them, Slava whispered. Could be our guys from the other side, Yura muttered. There were shapes on the ground around the vehicle. At first I tried to convince myself they were equipment, maybe pieces of armor. But one of them had a hand sticking out, glove half torn off, fingers curled. We stayed there for a long moment, just breathing. This was the second way I discovered the war had truly arrived, by seeing men I'd never met, in uniforms of another army, lying broken in a field that used to be just a shortcut kids took to school. You'd think I'd feel triumph. Good, that's what you deserve. Something like that. I felt off balance, like the earth had tilted a few degrees and nobody told me. These guys had woken up that morning, probably complaining about the cold just like I had, maybe thinking about home. Then somebody somewhere gave an order, and now they were pieces of a lesson. The first line of our soil saying, no. Let's move, I said, my voice sounding strange in my ears. We can't stay here. As we backed away, I caught myself staring at one of the bodies, trying to guess his age. I decided he was younger than me, too young to have that much metal sticking out of him. By the time we got back to our position, the war had become crowded. Everywhere there were overlapping stories. People on their phones showing us videos of Russian jets over other cities. Telegram channels screaming about paratroopers, columns, saboteurs. Someone said Belarusian troops might join in. Another guy swore there were Chechens already in the forest west of us. Reality and rumor mixed into a thick soup. You drank it because there was nothing else. The turning point for me came later that day, when a guy from Territorial Defense showed up at our trench with a captured phone. Found it in an abandoned truck, he said, handing it to our platoon commander. Might be nothing, might be something. The phone was locked, but the commander scrolled through the notifications on the screen. Some were in Russian, some in that weird mix that people from both sides of the border use. Messages from Mama, from Nastya Hardis, from Andrei Tank. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, but we're only human. We crowded around when he opened one of the recent notifications. It was a voice message, just the preview text. Ma, don't worry. They say we'll be in Kharkov in 2 days. They'll meet us with flowers. Flowers. I actually laughed. It came out sharp and ugly. Flowers, Yura echoed. From what? The cemetery? I don't know why that line got to me more than the burned IFV, more than the radio chatter. Maybe because it was so intimate. A boy trying to calm his mother, clinging to the script he'd been fed. Quick operation. Locals waiting with bread and salt. Nazis under the bed. I imagined my own son, years from now, sending me a message from some foreign country. Don't worry, Papa. We're just here to liberate them. My stomach turned. It was in that moment, reading that line on a stranger's phone, that I fully understood what we were up against. Not just an army, but a whole story they'd been told about us. A story where we weren't people, just villains in a propaganda film. We passed the phone around. One of the younger guys, Dima, listened to more messages under his breath. His face went tight. They think we hate them for being Russian, he said finally. They think we're the monsters. Good, Slava muttered. Maybe they'll be scared. But that wasn't what Dima meant, and we all knew it. We weren't saints, any of us. We swore, we joked cruelly. Some of us had done things since 2014 that we didn't talk about at family dinners. But we were home. We were defending our houses, our streets, the names of our dead grandparents. For them, we were an abstract enemy from TV. For us, they were men who believed that, and came anyway. That day ended oddly quiet. No major assaults, just some probing fire, a few mortar rounds that landed too far to be more than a reminder. The unexpected thing was how normal some moments felt. I remember sitting on an ammo crate, cleaning my rifle, while two guys argued about football like they were in a bar and not a trench. I remember a grandmother from the nearest village walking up to our position with a plastic bag full of still-warm pirishki, scolding us for not wearing our hats because you'll catch cold before the Russians even get here. I remember checking my phone for news, then realizing the news was me, was us, and suddenly not caring what some TV studio in another city had to say. In that weird calm, between the burned IFV and the next attack that hadn't yet begun, something settled inside me. I discovered, quietly, that I didn't want revenge. Don't get me wrong, I wanted us to win. I wanted every Russian vehicle that crossed our border to either go back or end up as scrap metal. I wanted their generals to choke on their lies. But when I thought about that boy with the flowers text, about the bodies in the hollow, about the radio voice complaining about fuel, I realized I didn't actually care about punishing them personally. I just wanted them gone. Wanted them to take their myths and their missiles and their imperial nostalgia and get the hell out of my country. It's a small difference, maybe, from the outside. From the inside, it felt important. Hatred is heavy. You can't carry it and your rifle for long. Purpose, though, that you can carry. So I made a quiet, private decision as I watched the sun go down behind the village rooftops, turning broken windows into orange shards. I'm not here to hate you, I thought, addressing nobody and everybody. I'm here to stop you. I didn't know then that I would later talk to some of those Russians face to face, that I would hear from their own mouths why they came, what they'd expected, what they'd found instead. That part came later, during the confrontation. But that evening, in our muddy little trench, I learned something essential. Who they thought they were who we knew we were, and why there could be no in-between on that strip of road. The war was no longer an abstract evil. It had a voice on the radio, a dead boy in a field, a stupid line about flowers on a cracked phone screen. And soon, very soon, it would have a face. The first real confrontation started with a dog. Not artillery, not tanks, not some grand maneuver. Just a skinny village dog trotting down the road with something in its mouth. We were in position before dawn, everyone silent, breath steaming in the cold. The village behind us was still half asleep. A few windows lit, someone's generator humming, the distant clank of a pot. The air had that tense, empty feeling you get right before an exam or a fist fight. Then, out of nowhere, this shaggy brown dog appears from the direction of the Russians, tail up, trotting right down the center of the asphalt like he owns it. "What's he got?" Dima whispered. We all peered over the edge of the trench. For a second, I thought it was a rabbit or a piece of meat. Then the dog got closer, and I saw the shape better. "Is that bread?" Yura muttered. It was.
Half a loaf, bitten at one end. The damned dog had somehow gone rummaging around near their positions, stolen bread, and was now proudly bringing it our way, like some messed-up peace offering. I don't know why, but the sight broke the tension. Someone snorted. Someone else had to muffle a laugh in his sleeve. "Good boy," Slava breathed. "International humanitarian corridor." Right then, the radio crackled in my ear. "They're moving," came the calm voice from the recon drone team. "Column forming up, 10 vehicles minimum, 3 armored, the rest trucks, heading toward you." The laughter died instantly. The dog veered off into the field, confused by our sudden silence, and disappeared into the grass. The road belonged to war again. When people imagine battles, they picture endless sound. In reality, there's always a heartbeat of silence right before things start, like the world sucking in a lungful of air. We lay low in our positions. I pressed my cheek against the stock of my rifle, the wood familiar against my skin. My heart was beating too fast, but my hands were steady. That old trick of the body, betraying fear in the chest, but not in the fingers. The first Russian vehicle appeared as a dark shape at the far end of the road. Then another. Then another. "Range?" our squad leader asked. 800, someone replied from the ATGM crew. The vehicles drew closer, engines growling, tracks grinding the asphalt. Through the optics, I could see details now. The faded green paint, the white markings smeared on the sides, soldiers riding on top, weapons slung casually. They thought they were coming to a quick cleanup operation. They didn't know the fields on either side of the road were already dialed in by our artillery. They didn't know we had eyes on them from above. They didn't know the skinny dog had just given us a neat little hint that breakfast was over there and death was over here. "Wait," came our commander's voice over the radio. "Let them commit." No early heroes. The column was maybe 500 meters out when something unexpected happened. The second truck swerved. Just a little. Enough that the third vehicle had to adjust. Enough that a guy riding on top shouted something and banged on the roof. "Driver's afraid," Slava whispered. "He feels it." I could see their faces now as blurry ovals. One of them stood up, scanning the fields with binoculars. He was doing exactly what he was supposed to, and it didn't matter, because we were dug in, camouflaged, silent. From their angle, we were just shadows and mud. Our commander gave the order. "Front ATGM, fire!" The missile's launch was a sharp cough, a brief jet of smoke. It streaked down the road, a straight white line against the gray morning. It hit the lead armored vehicle right under the turret. The explosion shoved sound into the world all at once. Fire blossomed, metal screamed, the vehicle lurched sideways, blocking half the road. "Artillery, pattern 2, came another order. A second later, the fields on both sides of the road erupted, fountains of earth and snow and shrapnel geysering up. The sound hit my chest like a physical shove. The Russian column panicked. Through my scope, I saw men scramble off the trucks, dropping into ditches, some running backward, some forward, nobody quite sure where safety was. One truck tried to reverse too fast and jackknifed, its trailer sliding sideways. "Pick your targets," our squad leader snapped. "Short bursts, make every round count." I fired. The recoil pushed into my shoulder, familiar, almost comforting. I saw a figure drop, another spin around and fall. I forced myself not to think of them as individuals. Green shapes with guns, that's all. They fired back, of course. Bullets whipped overhead, smacking into the parapet, kicking up little spurts of dirt. A tree behind us exploded into splinters. Then their mortars joined in. "Down!" someone shouted unnecessarily. We were already hugging the earth.
Rounds landed behind us. 1, 2, 3. Walking their way toward our positions. The ground trembled. Clods of dirt rained down on my helmet. Someone swore loudly, then swore again to prove he was still alive. In the chaos, with adrenaline ripping through me, something inside clicked into a strange clarity. Sound sharpened. Time stretched just enough for me to notice ridiculous details. The way one Russian soldier's helmet strap dangled loose as he fired. The exact pattern of cracks in the lead vehicle's shattered windshield. A crow launching itself from a tree, offended by all the noise. This is it, I thought. This is the part of the story where people later say, "We met them in battle." And we did. The confrontation wasn't just bullets and explosions, though. The truly weird part came about 20 minutes into the fight. By then, their initial attack was stalled. Our ATGMs had knocked out 2 armored vehicles. One more was stuck in a roadside ditch. Several trucks were burning, sending greasy black smoke into the sky. But they were still pushing, trying to find a way around, crawling through the fields, using the wrecks as cover. Their mortars had found our approximate position, and a shell had already wounded one of our guys, shrapnel in the leg. Not fatal, but bad enough that he was cursing and clutching at a bandage that kept turning red. We were in that grim phase where both sides knew the other wasn't going to vanish in a puff of smoke. Somebody would break. That was all. Then we heard shouting. Not ours. Theirs. At first I thought it was just the usual battlefield noise. Orders, curses. But it got louder. Different tones. An argument. Through my scope, I saw a cluster of Russians behind one of the knocked-out trucks. 2 were gesturing wildly toward the rear, pointing away from us. Another was shaking his head, jabbing his finger toward our positions, as if insisting we have to attack. I couldn't hear them over the gunfire and explosions, but our commander had a trick. "Hold fire for 10 seconds, he ordered on the internal channel. "Everyone, 10 seconds. No shots. Let's listen." 10 seconds in battle is an eternity. The guns fell silent, one after another, like someone was turning off switches. Even their side quieted down, confused. For a moment, the only sounds were the crackle of burning vehicles and the distant thud of artillery off somewhere else. And then we heard them. "Что ты, дурак? Сказали это учение. Учение, блядь!" What, are you stupid? They said it was exercises. Exercises, for fuck's sake. Another voice, older, angrier. "Какие учения? Ты не видишь, сука, это война! Вперед, приказ есть!" What exercises? Can't you see this is war? Forward, that's an order. I don't know why that hit me so hard, but it did. Here we were, in a real battle in my country, and at least one of them was still arguing that this was supposed to be a drill. Like if he said it enough times, the bullets would start firing blanks. Yura snorted softly beside me. "Welcome to the practical exam, Bratam,"
he muttered under his breath. Our commander gave the order to resume fire, and the moment snapped. But those words, exercises, war, order, stayed with me. The real face-to-face didn't happen until later that afternoon, though. By then, the fight on the road had turned decisively in our favor. Their column was shattered. The survivors had pulled back into the tree lines and shallow folds of the land, trying to regroup or retreat. We got the command to push forward in a limited assault, to clear the immediate area, checked for any stragglers who could call in artillery on us. I moved with a small group along the right side of the road, stepping over debris, keeping low. The smell was a mix of burned rubber, fuel, and that hot metal tang. A truck door hung open, swaying slightly. A crate of rations had spilled across the asphalt, Russian brand canned meat, biscuits, tea. Someone stepped on a packet, crushing it.
That's when I heard it. A voice. Weak in Russian. Ne strelайте, ne strelайте. Don't shoot. Don't shoot. I swung my rifle toward the sound, finger tight on the trigger. He was lying behind one of the rear wheels of a damaged truck. Young, of course he was young. Face pale under streaks of soot, blood on his sleeve, no helmet. His rifle lay a couple of meters away, out of reach. His eyes were huge. Dima, to my left, raised his weapon too. For a half-second, we all froze in a triangle of terror. Him afraid of us afraid he might still have a grenade, a pistol, anything. Our squad leader stepped up carefully, rifle aimed low but ready. "Живой?" he called out. "Оружие есть." You alive? You armed? The Russian shook his head too fast. "Нет, нет, не стреляйте, прошу." No, no, don't shoot, please. His accent was pure Central Russia, somewhere far from here, somewhere that probably looked a lot like our own villages, with the same ugly bus stops and gossiping grandmothers. "Check him," the squad leader ordered. I moved closer, heart hammering, covering him while Dima kicked the rifle away and patted him down with quick, practiced motions. "Wounded," Dima said. "Arm, maybe shoulder. No grenades, no pistol." "Okay," our squad leader said. "You're a prisoner now, Sinok." The boy blinked like the word didn't make sense. "Prisoner?" he repeated. "But they said—" He trailed off. We dragged him carefully into the lee of the truck, out of direct line of potential fire. Someone slapped a field dressing on his wound. He hissed, biting back a cry. "Name?" I asked, surprising myself. My voice sounded rough. He looked at me like he'd never been asked something so complicated. "Maxim," he said finally. "From Ryazan." "Why are you here, Maxim from Ryazan?" I asked. He stared at me for a long second. Then he laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. "They told us," he started, then stopped, glancing around as if his officers might be hiding behind the wreckage. They told us Nazis, NATO, biolabs. You know the script. He gestured weakly with his good hand. "They said we'd meet locals with flowers, that we're protecting you from America." He gave a crooked little smile. "You don't look very protected." I felt something twist in my chest. "And you believed that?" Dima asked sharply. Maxim flinched. "I believed we'd be in and out, that it wouldn't be like this." He nodded toward the burning vehicles, the scattered bodies. "They didn't talk about this." He swallowed hard. "I thought we were still in Russia for the first 2 days," he admitted quietly. "They told us it was drills. Then suddenly, we're crossing a border while they're shouting, 'Forward, forward.'"
Nobody asked us if we wanted to liberate anybody. He looked up at me again, eyes wet now, not just from pain. I didn't come here to die, he said, or to kill you. I just didn't want trouble. In my unit, if you question orders, it doesn't go well. There it was, the story from the other side, dropped at my feet like that dog's stolen bread. Unexpectedly, I wasn't satisfied by it. I didn't feel generous either. I felt tired. You're here anyway, I said, with a gun, on our land. He didn't argue, he just nodded, staring at his boots. I know, he whispered. Pozdno opravdavаться. Too late to make excuses. For a moment, the battle around us faded. The distant gunfire, the crackle of flames, the shouted orders, all of it turned into background noise. It was just me and this kid from Ryazan, both of us in uniforms, both of us with dirt under our nails, on opposite sides of a line somebody else drew. You know what I heard on your phone? I asked suddenly. He frowned. My phone? One of your guys left his in a truck we hit yesterday, I said. There was a message from a mom, talking about flowers, about being home soon. His face crumpled for a heartbeat, then he forced it flat again. Yeah, he said quietly. They all say that. Home soon. He met my eyes.
Will you kill me? He asked. The question landed between us like another mortar round. I shook my head once. You're a prisoner, I said. We're not like what they told you we are. He let out a breath that was half sob, half relief. Then maybe tell my mother I'm alive, he said. If you see her on my phone. We'll see what happens, I said. I didn't promise. War eats promises faster than rations. Our squad leader tapped my shoulder. Evac group is coming for him, he said. We move on. There may be more. As we left, Maxim called after me. Hey, Ukrainian! I glanced back. I didn't come here to hate you, he said. I just came because I was afraid not to. I stared at him, stunned. Those were my words, the ones I'd thought just the day before in the trench. I'm not here to hate you. I'm here to stop you. Turns out fear worked on both sides. It just pointed in different directions. We moved on, weapons up, scanning the wreckage for more movement, more threats. The confrontation wasn't over. There would be more battles, more Maxims, some living, some dead. But that first day on the road, the burning vehicles, the arguing officers, the kid from Ryazan, it changed something in me. The Russians were no longer faceless invaders. They were people who'd swallowed lies and now were bleeding them out onto my soil. It didn't make me softer. If anything, it made me harder. Because now, every time I saw one of those green uniforms, I knew exactly what I was shooting at. Not just a soldier, a man who chose, in the end, to step forward when he could have stepped aside. That knowledge would fuel a whole storm of emotions in the days that followed: rage, sorrow, numbness, something close to pity, and something very far from forgiveness. But that belonged to the emotional aftershocks. At the road, in the confrontation, there was only one clear thought left in my mind as we pushed on. You came. We're the answer. The strange thing is, The big battles aren't what haunt me most. Don't get me wrong, there are moments from that day on the road that still visit me at night. The flash of the first ATGM hit, a man running with his jacket on fire, Maxim's face when he realized we weren't going to shoot him. But the real emotional damage came later, in the quieter days that slid in between the noise. War has aftershocks. Nobody warned you about those. The morning after the battle, I woke up twice. First time, it was like any other rotation in a trench. My back hurt, my mouth tasted of old cigarettes, my hands were numb from the cold. I sat up, bumped my helmet on the edge of the dugout roof, swore out of habit. Second time was when memory rushed back in. I remembered the burning trucks, the smell of blood and diesel, the Russian arguing about exercises, Maxim clutching his arm and asking me if he'd die. It all dropped onto my chest at once, heavy as a sandbag. For a second, I couldn't breathe. It's funny, during the fight itself, I'd felt clear, focused. But now, with my rifle leaning harmlessly against the dugout wall, everything I'd pushed aside came flooding back. The faces of the men I'd aimed at, the way one of them had fallen and stayed fallen. You know that phrase, "it hit me"? That's exactly how it feels, like a delayed impact. The shell lands, doesn't go off right away, then boom, inside your skull. I crawled out into the morning light, squinting. The sky was a pale, stupid blue, like nothing had happened. Yura was already up, smoking, his eyes ringed with dark smudges. "You look like shit," he said casually. "You look worse," I replied. We grinned at each other, but it felt like we were both using the wrong muscles. The first punch of emotion wasn't pride or even relief. It was disgust. Not at them. At myself. I kept replaying small things that nobody else noticed. A shot I took at a man who was already half behind cover. The way I'd laughed, actually laughed, when one of their vehicles blew up in a particularly dramatic way. At the time, it felt normal. Adrenaline plus survival equals ugly humor. But the next day, when everything slowed down, those moments lined up in my head like accusations. "So this is who you are now," a voice whispered. "A man who measures success in bodies on the road." I didn't tell anyone I was thinking like that. You don't want to be that guy, the one who suddenly gets philosophical after a firefight. Besides, everyone had their own ghosts circling. But I saw it in the others too, in small ways. Slava, usually the loudest, spent the whole afternoon cleaning his rifle in total silence, his jaw clenched. Dima, who'd joked about scaring them with our monster reputation, sat for a long time staring at his hands. At one point, he rubbed his thumb and forefinger together and muttered, "Blood comes off easier than I thought." Then he went quiet again. Even our commander, who'd been rock solid during the battle, smoked 3 cigarettes in a row down to the filter, like he was trying to burn something out of his lungs. We weren't broken. We were dented. News from the wider front trickled in like water through a cracked roof. Kharkiv holding, Mariupol surrounded, Kyiv still standing, still fighting. There were pictures of civilian cars shot up on roads, apartment blocks turned into beehives of shattered windows, kids sleeping in subway stations. Every new horror we saw on our phones fed the same feeling: anger. A big, hot, simple thing. Easy to carry because it didn't demand nuance. I held on to that anger like it was a life jacket. It made everything straightforward. They are doing this to us. We will stop them. End of story. Then something happened that ruined that beautiful simplicity. We got our first dead back. One of the guys in another platoon, Serhiy, had gone missing during the fight on the road. Last anyone saw, he'd been moving up the left flank, covering the ATGM crew. A mortar landed nearby. After that, Nothing. We hoped he'd been knocked out, maybe captured, maybe dragged off by our own guys and evacuated in the confusion. 2 days later, a villager came to one of our checkpoints. He'd been fetching water from a well on the outskirts and found a body in the ditch. They brought Serhi to us in the back of a white van that used to deliver bread. The smell hit first, sour and wrong. He'd been lying out for a while. He didn't look like himself. It's amazing how fast the face becomes just shapes, swollen, discolored. The only thing that was still clearly him was the tattoo on his forearm, a little cartoon sun his daughter had drawn for him once, which he'd taken to a tattoo artist. His best friend, Kolya, stood staring at the body, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides. "He was supposed to rotate home next month," Kolya said. "We were all going to get that stupid sun tattoo. Said it would be our ammunition against depression." He tried to laugh and failed. We wrapped Serhi in a simple tarp. No big ceremony, no speeches. Just a brief, awkward silence. As we lifted him into another vehicle to be sent back toward his hometown, I felt the anger flare again, sharper than before. "You did this," I thought, directing it at every Russian uniform in my mental crosshairs. You and your lies and your liberation that nobody asked for. But then, uninvited, another thought slipped in. And they did it for what? For a story about Nazis and NATO and flowers? I thought of Maxim again, his voice shaking as he said he hadn't come here to hate us. I pictured him alive somewhere, bandaged, sitting in one of our makeshift holding areas, maybe eating a piece of bread that tasted disturbingly like the one from his own rations. I wanted to hold on to pure, clean rage.
Instead, what I got was a mess. Anger laced with something like pity. Grief tangled up with this bitter understanding that he was also somebody's son, being lied to in another language. It was exhausting. The weirdest breakdown came from the most unexpected person. There was a guy in our unit everyone called Priest, even though he wasn't religious. He was just the oldest and had a calm, fatherly way of talking. Gray at the temples, slow to speak, never raised his voice. 3 days after the road battle, we were sitting in a half-ruined shed eating whatever passed for lunch. Canned stew, stale bread, cold tea. Shelling thumped occasionally in the distance, but not dangerously close. Someone showed us a video on his phone. Captured Russian soldiers in another part of the front, calling their families. One of them was crying so hard he could barely speak. His mother, on the other end, kept saying, "I don't believe you. How can this be? They said you were just at exercises. They said..." You could see it in her face. That moment when reality starts punching holes in the story you built your world on. "Serves them right," one of the younger guys said. "Let 'em choke on the truth." Priest was staring at the screen, his spoon halfway to his mouth, hand shaking just a little. "Turn it off," he said quietly. The guy didn't hear him. "I said, turn it off!" Priest suddenly roared, standing up so fast his chair fell over. The whole shed went silent. We'd never heard him raise his voice. The video stopped. The phone disappeared into a pocket. Priest stood there for a second, chest heaving, then sank back down onto the fallen chair. "Sorry," he muttered. "Sorry, He rubbed his face hard with both hands. "They look like my boy," he said, voice cracking. "That one, with the shaved head. He even smiles like him. Same stupid fucking grin." We had never heard him talk about his family. "He's in Kyiv," Priest went on. "Territorial defense. We text when we can." Last he wrote, he said, "Don't worry, Papa. I'm not at the front. Just helping with checkpoints. It's safe." He laughed bitterly. "I know he's lying to me. Same as that boy's commanders lied to his mother. That's what this war is. Fathers and mothers being lied to from both sides.
and then collecting bodies the liars never see. No one said anything. There wasn't much to say. Finally, he looked up at us, eyes red and wet. "I want us to win," he said. "Don't ever think otherwise. I want every last one of them out of here. But don't ask me to enjoy their mothers finding out the truth. I've got one son. I don't know if I get to keep him." That hit me harder than any shell, because that's when I realized what had been happening to me emotionally since the battle. I was moving from cartoon emotions to human ones. At first, everything was simple. They are bad, we are good. They suffer, we cheer. We suffer, we rage. But now reality was shoving in its own complexity, like shrapnel you couldn't pick out. And war with reality is a fight nobody wins. The sadness crept in slowly, like damp. It arrived at night mostly, when it was my turn to sleep and I couldn't. I'd stare up at the dugout roof, counting the knots in the wood, listening to someone snore nearby, artillery thumping like a slow, distant heartbeat. My thoughts circled stupid things, my son's question about tanks and tractors, my mother's habit of leaving the light on in the hallway in case you come in late, the way my wife once got mad at me for leaving muddy boots in the wrong corner. Ridiculous, tiny memories that suddenly weighed as much as armored vehicles. One night, I watched a spider try to build a web in the corner of our dugout. Every time it spun a bit of silk, someone shifted or bumped the wall and the thread broke. The spider kept trying anyway. I found myself whispering, "Just wait till peacetime, idiot." Then you can catch all the flies you want. Then it hit me. I was giving motivational speeches to a spider. That's when the sadness really flooded in, because underneath all my anger, my stubbornness, my soldier's pride, there was one simple childlike desire. I just wanted to go home. Not in a flag-covered box, not in a convoy of wounded, just home. To boredom and bills and dumb arguments about taking the trash out. I wanted a world where my biggest problem again was finding my kid's missing sock. I missed my own life like it was a person. Acceptance didn't come in some grand Zen moment. It arrived in scraps. A joke told during shelling that was actually funny. The muscle memory of disassembling and reassembling my rifle without thinking. The way I automatically reached for my helmet at the first distant whistle without panicking. One afternoon, about a week after the road battle, I caught my reflection again in that same cracked car mirror in the trench wall. I looked at myself for a long time, the new lines around my mouth, the dirt ground into my skin, the eyes that had seen too much in too few days. "Okay," I said quietly to my own face. "This is you. This is your life now. Stop being surprised." It wasn't resignation exactly, more like alignment. I stopped expecting the war to end soon, the way everyone had been saying. I stopped imagining that we'd wake up one morning to some magical peace treaty and all go marching home under blue and yellow flags while people threw flowers. What I accepted was simpler and harder. Some of us would make it home. Some wouldn't. We had almost no control over which group we'd fall into. What we did control in our tiny strip of the front was this. Would the Russians get past us or not? Would they reach the town behind us or not? Would we make it so damned expensive for them that their commanders had to pause and reconsider their 3-day master plan? Once I framed it that way,
something inside me settled.
I still felt everything: anger, grief, pity, fear. Those didn't vanish, but they stopped pulling me in different directions. They became fuel. Fuel to stay awake on guard when my eyelids were made of lead. Fuel to carry extra ammo for the guy next to me. Fuel to keep my finger steady on the trigger when the target looked too young, too tired, too scared. I decided, not calmly, not heroically, just stubbornly, that I could live with all these contradictions as long as we held our line. Sometimes acceptance isn't peaceful. Sometimes it's just the point where you stop waiting for your old life to come back and fully step into the one you actually have. Mine was wearing a uniform, smelling of smoke and mud, standing on a piece of road in eastern Ukraine. And whether I liked it or not, I was going to have to decide what kind of man I was going to be in that life. That decision came sooner than I expected. The Russians regrouped. Their tactics changed. And we got orders that would force me to choose between the neat revenge everyone imagines and the complicated responsibility I'd grown into without noticing. But that's another part of the story. The order that forced my decision didn't sound dramatic on the radio. It was just a set of coordinates and a calm voice saying, "Enemy infantry regrouping in residential sector on the edge of town. Possible strong point forming. Artillery ready. Need confirmation to fire." Residential sector. That phrase is like stepping on broken glass barefoot. We'd held the road long enough that the Russians tried a different route, slipping around through a patchwork of small streets and private houses on the outskirts. Old one-story homes with vegetable gardens and rusty swings in the yard. The kind of place where people know each other's dogs by name. Our drone guys had spotted them taking cover there after a failed push. Maybe 20 Russian soldiers filtering into the area, moving between houses, using fences as cover. A couple of armored vehicles had parked near a small shop with a faded "Produkty" sign. On the drone feed, you could see civilians too. A woman in a pink jacket dragging a suitcase. A man smoking on a balcony like it was any other Tuesday. 2 kids kicking at something in the snow. Our artillery battery had them in range, guns already laid. One word from us and that whole cluster of streets would turn into a messy crater. I was with the forward observation team that day, lying in an attic of an abandoned house at the edge of town, watching the same scene with binoculars. Broken tiles under my chest, dust in my throat, the smell of old curtains and mouse shit. "Ukrainian forward, this is battery," came the radio voice again. "We're on a tight schedule. Do we fire or not?" Our lieutenant swore under his breath, glancing at me and Yura. "Civilians are still moving around," I said. "At least a dozen, maybe more inside." "Yeah," Yura added. "Those Russians know exactly what they're doing hiding there. They want us to either back off or blow up somebody's grandma." The lieutenant chewed his lip, thinking. Here's the thing. On paper, it's simple. You hit the enemy concentration, you save your own guys later. You stop them from digging in, from turning those houses into fortresses our infantry will have to flush out room by room. But maps don't cry. Coordinates don't have names. Those streets did. I recognized one of them in the scope. I'd bought cigarettes at that little Produkty 2 weeks before the invasion. The shopkeeper had complained about prices and politicians and teenagers who never say hello. "But at least there's no war," she'd said then, shrugging. "We'll manage." Now there were 2 Russian APCs parked outside her store like they'd popped in for snacks. "Battery, stand by," the lieutenant said finally. Then, to us, "We need better eyes. We can't make this call blind." He looked right at me. "You up for a closer look?" It wasn't an order, exactly. More like a question written in capital letters. I nodded before my fear could get a vote. We moved through backyards like thieves. Me, Yura, and the lieutenant, ducking past old sheds, stepping over low fences, keeping to the shadows of fruit trees that hadn't been pruned in years. Somewhere a dog barked itself hoarse behind a closed gate. A curtain twitched as we passed. The closer we got, the louder everything felt. My heart beat,
the crunch of snow under boots, the faint engine hum from the armored vehicles by the shop. We stopped behind a wooden fence with missing planks. Through the gaps, we could see the little street clearly now. Russian soldiers were scattered around, nervous, jumpy. One was talking frantically on a handheld radio, waving his free hand like the air offended him. Two others were forcing a metal door open, shouting something inside. Another sat on the APC, legs dangling, scanning the rooftops with binoculars. On the other side of the street, a woman stood in front of her gate with her arms crossed, arguing with a soldier who kept gesturing toward her house. I couldn't hear actual words, but I knew the conversation. "Get inside, babushka." "This is my house, I won't." "We'll shoot." "Then shoot." "Battery, forward," our lieutenant whispered into the radio. "I confirm enemy presence in civilian area. Several vehicles, at least squad-sized infantry." He paused. "But there are civilians still on the street and in the houses. Firing now means high collateral damage. Over." On the other end, silence stretched for a long second. Then, "Forward. Do you have the capability to engage with small arms and AT weapons instead? Push them out?" That was code for, if you don't use the big guns, you're volunteering to go do it the hard way. The lieutenant looked at us again. No speech, no big gesture, just a raised eyebrow like, well? I already knew my answer. I'd found it somewhere between Sergei's tarp-covered body and Priest's cracked voice talking about his son. I thought of the Russians I'd seen that morning, weaving between those houses. I thought of Maxim, of, "I didn't come here to hate you," of how easily everything could blur if we started telling ourselves that anyone near them was fair game. I realized this was it, the line, the one that would define the kind of soldier I'd be. "No artillery," I said, "not with kids and old people right there. We're not them." Yura nodded. "We hit them up close. We make it messy for them, not for the whole street." The lieutenant gave a short, humorless smile. "Good," he said. "I was hoping you'd say that. I'm too old to start pretending I don't care who's in those houses." He keyed the radio again. "Battery, this is forward. Negative on fire mission. Repeat, negative. Civilians in the area. We will attempt to push enemy from sector by direct engagement." The reply came back, tight but respectful. "Understood, forward. Good luck. We'll be ready if they break into the open." So that was the decision. No trumpets, no dramatic pause, just one word: negative. A whole chunk of town probably still standing because of it, or maybe not. Maybe those houses would be hit tomorrow or the next day by some other exchange. War doesn't hand out receipts. But I knew what I would have to live with afterward, and that mattered. Close combat in streets is nothing like movies. It's faster and slower at the same time. Fast in the way things explode into chaos. Slow in the way your brain remembers every door frame, every breath, every shouted warning. We circled around, linking up with another squad from our unit. Together, we moved in a rough line, using gardens and alleyways, keeping pressure from the flank. The first contact came near a small playground. A Russian soldier ran out from behind a shed, nearly colliding with us. For a split second, he stared, eyes wide, rifle slung instead of ready.
He looked exactly like a conscript who'd gone to throw out the trash and found a bear in the yard. "Lejat!" I shouted automatically. "Down." He dropped his rifle more than he dropped himself, hands flying up. We could have shot him easily. Some guys would have. But he was already surrendering before his brain finished catching up. It would have felt like shooting a man in the middle of a word. Instead, we booted his weapon away and shoved him toward the rear. "Prisoner!" someone yelled. "One more for the collection." "Tell your friends to get out of our yards," Yura snarled at him in Russian as he passed. "Or the next ones won't be so lucky." The prisoner nodded frantically, though who he'd be able to tell now, I didn't know. We pushed on. There were real fights too, of course. A burst from a window that chewed up the tree next to me. A grenade tossed into what they thought was our position, but turned out to be a chicken coop. A weird little duel across a street where we traded shots with someone hiding behind a burnt-out car, our rounds pinging off metal. But even in the middle of that, the thing I remember most is the civilians. An old man in a flat cap standing stubbornly in his yard as bullets smacked into the wall behind him, yelling, "Both sides, get the hell away from my apple trees!" A teenage girl dragging her little brother into a basement, glaring at us like we were idiots for existing. A middle-aged woman quietly handing us a thermos of tea as we passed through her gate, as if we were delivering the mail instead of weaving through a battlefield. "For you, boys," she said. "Don't spill it. Cups are expensive." Those were the people I'd refused to call collateral on the radio. I won't pretend our way was clean. A stray bullet still punched through someone's kitchen window. A shell fragment still tore up someone's garden. You cannot surgically remove men with rifles from a living neighborhood.
But when it was over, when the last Russian vehicle finally screeched away, spilling smoke, with our machine guns snapping at its heels, the street was mostly still there. The little shop was damaged, windows blown, door hanging off its hinges. The swing set had a bullet hole. A dog limped. But the houses still stood. The woman in the pink jacket still stood too, now sitting on a bench, hands shaking as she lit a cigarette. "Spasibo, synki," she said quietly in Russian. "Thank you, boys." Then, more sharply, "Next time kill them faster. I was making soup." We laughed, a bit hysterically. That night, back in our trench, I waited for regret. I waited for the little voice to say, "You idiot. If you'd used artillery, you might have killed more of them, spared your own unit some risk. You chose feelings over efficiency." It didn't come. What came instead was a strange, solid calm, the kind you get after making a hard choice and surviving it. I looked around at our guys, tired, bruised, alive. I imagined what it would be like to walk through that same street later, after the war, and not have to step over rubble where kids used to play. Maybe the windows would be fixed. Maybe the shop would restock and the woman would complain about prices again. And I thought, yeah, I can carry this. I can live with this. That became my rule going forward, the axis my decisions spun on. Fight them as hard as you can, make their advance as costly as possible. But don't become what they told their people you were. Don't turn into the monster in their TV story just because it's easier. That didn't mean softness. If anything, I became more ruthless where it counted, against their armor, their positions, their logistics. We learned to hit them smarter, to ambush, to starve their columns of fuel, to sabotage bridges in ways that made engineers nod in grudging respect. But with civilians? With prisoners? With that thin line between combatant and human being? There, I held the line I'd drawn. And one more unexpected thing came out of that decision. Remember Maxim from Ryazan? A week after the street fight, I ended up in the rear for a day, getting my hearing checked after a shell landed too close. The medic's tent was near a temporary holding point for prisoners. Nothing fancy, just a fenced area with a couple of guards and some canvas. As I walked past, someone called out, "Hey, Ukrainian!" I turned. There he was. Arm in a proper bandage now, face a little less ghostly, but definitely the same kid. "You're alive," I said, as if it surprised me. It did. "Disappointed?" he asked, managing a faint smirk. I shook my head. He shifted, wincing.
They let us send one message home, he said. Supervised, but still. He paused. I told my mother I was captured, that I'm being treated okay, that the war is not exactly what they said. How'd she take it? I asked. She cried, he said. Then the line cut. But she heard my voice. That's something. He studied me for a moment. They also showed us a video, he added, of your cities, Bucha, Mariupol, places they said you were shelling yourselves to blame us. His jaw tightened. I'm not an idiot, he said. I can see who's doing what. I just didn't want to see it before. He looked down at his hands. Some of the guys here, they still cling to the story. It's fake, it's staged, it's all edited. I used to talk like that. He lifted his eyes back to mine. I don't anymore. I didn't suddenly forgive him. This wasn't some magic reconciliation scene where violins start playing and the war ends. But I did feel something shift. Good, I said. Maybe when you go back, if you go back, you'll tell them we're not demons. Just very angry people who like our homes the way they are. He gave me a tired grin. I'll tell them you're bad hosts, he said. Terrible hospitality. 0 flowers. We both chuckled. As I walked away, I realized my decision on how to proceed had grown larger than that one artillery call.
I was going to fight them with everything I had, rifle, training, stubbornness. But I was also going to fight the story that brought them here, by how I acted, by what their captured sons could honestly tell their mothers later. Not because I owed them anything, because I owed us something. I owed us a victory we could look in the mirror after. That's the thing nobody tells you about war. Yes, it's about land and flags and lines on maps, but it's also about who you get to be when it's finally over, if it ever is. And for me, that meant choosing over and over, even when I was exhausted and furious. We will be hard. We will not be hollow. That choice didn't save everyone. It didn't prevent all tragedies. But it gave shape to the way I carried them. The emotional storm wasn't over. There were more losses ahead, more betrayals, more unexpected kindnesses from strangers who had nothing left to give. And at the end of it all, when I finally got a moment to breathe and look back, I realized I'd collected not just scars, but lessons.